this off quickly. And I think it's linked up here. Well, good evening. That's working better. Thank you. I am so excited about being here this evening, Marianne and myself. I just want to give you the shortest of introductions because I'm too excited about the message to go on about where we come from for too long. But we met when we were 18 years old, got married 3 months after we met. And we started traveling and ministering in Africa and in the neighboring countries there. And what initially excited us and the reason we went was because we discovered a God that is so much more than just a list of rules. We discovered a God that's so much more than just a demanding, distant creature. But we discovered a God who, in the person of Jesus, came to reveal this God who entangles himself with your life. We discovered that the Incarnation is not just some ancient church doctrine, but it is the ongoing process by which God involves himself in your fleshly existence. This Word became flesh. And this Word continues this process of incarnation in your life. And so I think many of us within our religious upbringing, there's a period in which we might perceive God as rather distant. Someone who just watches you from a distance, who expects a certain kind of behavior from you. And that was certainly my experience for a while. And then when I was about 16, I remember I thought, I need to either do this Christian thing the right way or just forget about it. So I was sure if I could just sin a little bit less, God would be closer. Now, if I could just act a little bit better, God would really start doing things with me and through me. And so I started putting in a concerted effort, even kept a list of how long can I go without sinning. And I'm sure I could break this record very quickly. And I remember one day just falling down on my bed in just such utter disappointment at my own failure again. And in that moment where I was disappointed in myself, I just became aware of Jesus standing at the edge of my bed. And he had this big smile on his face. It was just total approval, which was so contrary to what I expected. I thought God should be at least as disappointed in me as what I was. But here he was, just absolutely loving me. And in that moment, I realized that even if I turned my back on him and ran the other way, he would love me just the same. He just couldn't help himself. He liked me. And that's the moment where religion disappeared, and I discovered that this relationship is about falling in love. This relationship is about this dynamic, exciting movement of a real encounter with a God that's excited about you. You see, why did God bother making all of us? What was God thinking? Did he just need some entertainment? No, was he just bored? Or was God a grumpy old judge in an empty courtroom and he thought, I need some victims. And here you are. What motivated God? Was he just, thinking, what kind of creature can I invent that will irritate me for all eternity. Was that what motivated him? No, Jesus comes to demonstrate in this act of the Incarnation that your humanity has always been God's idea. That who you are is not just some afterthought. When you look at the book of Colossians, when he speaks about Jesus, he says, speaking about Christ, he says, he is before all things, and in him all things consists. Now, Jesus is this union of God and man, and very often we think maybe this union just came about as like a plan B. You know, Adam and Eve didn't quite work out the way we hoped, and this is kind of plan B of God coming to rescue what was messed up there. It's almost as if we imagine that, you know, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit was trying to get us to get with the plan for a few thousand years, kept sending us notes and texts and prophets and things, but we just did not get it. And so eventually they decided, well, one of us will have to go down there and sort this out ourselves. And Jesus drew the short straw and kind of bit reluctantly he came, because, you know, if you omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, it is quite a downgrade to become human, where you're in one place at one time. And maybe Jesus suddenly realizes, oh my goodness, this being human thing is a bit harder than what we imagined it would be from a distance. You know, and so when he eventually gets back to heaven, he says, Father, let's just help them out. Let's cut the rules in half, call it grace, make it easier on them. But it's not going to work the way. No, this was never plan B. Before all things, before there was even a story of Adam and Eve, before the first human being was created, it was God's intention to exist in human life. And Jesus is the revelation of that intention that was in the heart of the Father before time began. And so John 1 verse 1, in the beginning was this Word. This Word was with God. This Word was God. And all things came into existence through him. In other words, all of creation is incarnation. Ooh, the implications of this is huge. You see, in verse 10, it says that this Word has always been in the world. Jesus is not an alien invasion from a foreign God who comes to visit us. Jesus is the manifestation, the revelation of what has always been true. This Word was in the world, but we did not recognize him. And so in verse 14, we start reading about this Word becoming flesh. Now, in the midst of a humanity that constantly imagined a distant God, a God who, and you know, in all the beautiful poetry that many of the philosophies of the day wrote about their gods, the gods were always distant. Why? Because they imagined that the gods lived in this place of absolute peace and bliss. And for them, that kind of peace and bliss meant the total absence of problems or pain or suffering. And so the gods would sit on their clouds, and they might see a war and a wedding, a birth or a murder, and they would be unmoved. Because if they allowed themselves to be moved, they would lose their peace. And so these gods that we imagined were always rather distant, because if they had to get involved in your life, they were going to lose their peace pretty quickly. They're going to lose their bliss pretty quickly. They're going to be in the midst of the confrontation and all the stuff that happens. And so it's in the midst of these ideas of a God that is distant. And even within the Jewish faith, there is this growing conversation where they begin also with the same kind of concept of a God that is very distant, but God engages them in a conversation. And generation after generation, he persuades them, I'm the kind of God who wants to live amongst you. I'm the kind of God who wants a skin-covered, mobile dwelling place. Remember the tabernacle? It was that skin-covered, mobile dwelling place, a picture of what was going to be revealed in the Incarnation, where God would enter his skin-covered tabernacles. And so in verse 14 we read, this word became flesh. Our ideas of a God who is distant is suddenly dissolved, suddenly exposed. And when John wrote this letter, this thought was absolutely scandalous. You see, most of these writings today, we've taken 2,000 years to make them acceptable and to make them respectable. But most of the scriptures were written as the most anti-religious text of their day. It was written to set people free from religious superstitions. And so John starts speaking about a God who's not distant, but a God who steps right into the middle of your flesh. A God who steps right into the middle of your confrontation, your contradiction, and intertwines himself with your human life. And unveils that this is where I've always wanted to find my existence. The Incarnation, in a way, is God's declaration that I don't want to be God by myself, with myself, or for myself. The only way in which I want to be God is with man, for man, and as man, in the person of Jesus Christ. You see, in Jesus, we do not meet a God who said, hey guys, you need to become a little bit more spiritual. You need to arise and descend to a greater level of divinity. No, in Jesus, we meet a God who says, I want to descend into your humanity. I want to entangle myself in your life. I want to become part of your existence. Now, very often we read verse 14, and the Word became flesh, and we simply relate it to Jesus. He's the Word that was in the beginning, that was with God, that was God. Remember verse 1 and 2. But if we look at verse 13, it actually speaks about you. Because it says, you were born, not of the will of man or of the will of flesh, but of God. And the thoughts of God became flesh. Remember, we asked the question, what is it that motivated God? And Jesus leads us to understand that motivation so beautifully in John 17, verse 24, where he says, Father, I pray that they may be with me where I am, that they may behold the love with which you loved me and the honor with which you honored me even before this world began. In other words, Jesus speaks about this eternal space, this space before this world began, not as a abstract place of static changelessness, the way in which the Hellenistic philosophers viewed it. But Jesus speaks about this eternal place as a place of dynamic exchange of relationship. And it is in this place of relationship where the God who is the infinite possibility of everything continually imagines new ways of expressing himself, that he imagines you as a being in which it's possible for him to find his own joy, his own freedom, his own existence within this world. Now, how is that possible? I don't know whether you're quiet, whether that's just the way it is normally in the church, whether you're shocked or whether you're just quietly excited. Okay. But I know that feeling where there's such beauty in these thoughts, and I know maybe a lot of questions are popping, but that's fine. You see, one of the beautiful things that we see in this movement of the Incarnation is that suddenly we meet a God who doesn't come just with a lot of demands. But just after he said, and the Word became flesh, it says, and of his fullness have we all received. Actually, there's a little piece in between. The Word became flesh and tabernacled in us. Remember the tabernacle? The skin-covered mobile dwelling place? This picture in the Old Testament of the kind of existence that God wants amongst these people. So the Word becomes flesh, tabernacles in us, and of his fullness have we all received. A 13th century, I think it's 13th century, 12 or 13, monk called Bonaventure, he said it this way: God's center is everywhere, but his circumference is nowhere. He is within, but he is not confined. He's without, but he is not excluded. He's above, but he's not aloof. He's below, but he's not abased. He is the all in all. He made some other radical statements as well. For instance, he said, God does not exist as a being amongst other beings. Rather, he is the source of all existence. The source of all being. And so this is what Jesus begins to unveil. This word, this logic, this thought through which all things exists. And it's not as if creation was just a past event in which this separate divine entity threw together a universe and now watches it from a distance. Rather, what Jesus begins to reveal is that creation is always an ongoing relationship. It is never a past event. Creation is incarnation. Creation is God pouring himself out into all existence moment by moment. Meister Eckhart, another monk from the 13th century, said it this way. He said, if you could truly see what makes you you in this moment, you will see nothing less than the infinite generosity of God pouring himself out into your existence. Can you hear these echoes in John's words? The Word became flesh and tabernacled in us. And of his fullness have we all received grace upon grace upon grace. Every moment of life is a gift. Every second is grace. Now, what is the difference between need and desire? I want to draw that distinction because was it just a need in God that caused him and causes him to create? Was God just suffering from an inferiority complex and thought, if I can just get 6 billion people to tell me how amazing I am, I'll feel better about myself? We know how ridiculous that sounds because it is. God does not create out of a sense of need. In fact, Ephesians tells us that he knew you and called you before the foundation of this world. And then he continues by saying, this God only does what he desires, what pleases him. Now, what's the difference between need and desire? You've got some hot weather here. I thought Africa's hot, but we live in a place that doesn't have this humidity. So if we want to go for runs or walks every now and then, and boy, we get thirsty. This is a hot spot. And when we get thirsty, I mean, any drink will do, whether it's water or beer or whatever. I'm just thirsty. Give me something to drink. And so that's, you understand need. It's just, I don't even distinguish between what drink it. I'm just thirsty. But I remember a while ago, one morning we woke up, and my ritual in the morning during that time, because we traveled for 6 years constantly, every week somewhere else. So I would wake up and think, what continent is this? What country? What town? Okay, it's there. And once I figured out where I am, think, what's happening today? And that morning I woke up realizing, today I'm going to the dentist. It's not always the most inspiring thought to wake up to. But so as soon as that thought hit me, I suddenly also remembered, and it was a brilliant dentist. I actually enjoyed visiting there. But as soon as I realized that, I realized around the corner from him was our favorite coffee shop in the world. It was the Viking heaven called Valhalla Coffee Shop. And if you have to choose between heavens, that must be number 2. That is like really good. And so suddenly this coffee presented itself to my imagination. It's a little old coffee shop, but they roast their beans freshly within this little shop. So you walk in there and the smell just permeates you, and then they scoop it out the roaster into the grinder. And the coffee that comes out there is so creamy you don't even need milk. So suddenly this coffee presented itself to me, and desire was awakened. And suddenly my life had purpose, and the day was bright. And I had a cup of water or a cup of tea that morning, but the desire does not go away, because the desire cannot be satisfied with anything else but what it desires. So are you ready for the gospel? The gospel is the gloriously good news that you are completely and utterly unnecessary. Can I say that again? The gospel is this gloriously good news that you are unnecessary. God existed without you. He did not need you. But you, for God, you were that cup of coffee. That idea of something so beautiful, something so meaningful, something so exciting, that he said, this thought, I must put some flesh on it. And the thoughts of God became flesh. Your life is pure grace. Your life is pure gift. God didn't even create you because he had some grand plan and purpose that he couldn't fulfill without you. No, he created you for the simple reason that he enjoyed the thought of you. And moment by moment, he continues to pour himself out into your existence. Maybe another way I want to illustrate it before Marianne comes and do a few songs for us. And maybe, I won't mention that. But maybe just to illustrate this point of life is a gift. And when you discover the very source of this gift, gratitude becomes the basis of your existence. When you discover that you are not needed, neither does God demand anything from you, but you are desired, and therefore he continually gives himself to you. It changes the very basis of your existence from one of anxiety to one of gratitude. Now, during this period where we traveled consistently, we eventually discovered that for the sake of sanity, we need to take a week in a month and not minister, because we would go every day, continually. And we need to take that week and we just need to be with one another. And this was actually, I got the notice, it was 2 years ago this happened. We had an appointment up in the Netherlands. We were speaking the one evening. And then our next appointment was a week later in Switzerland. And I thought, where's our gap? It's a week, that's our week. And we thought, where are we going to go? Where are we going to stay to just be together? And then we thought, why don't we just cycle from the Netherlands to Switzerland? It's only like 1,000 miles. And we haven't cycled since we were teenagers, which wasn't that long ago, about 27 years ago. But in any case, we thought, hey, that sounds fun. So we spoke to our precious friends who had a bed and breakfast, and they had 2 very basic bicycles that they would give to their guests to go to the town and back, and said, can we use that? He said, you're very welcome to. I don't know if they're going to get to Switzerland, but you can use it. And that last evening when we finished our meeting in the Netherlands, a young guy walked up to me, a friend of ours, and he said, I hear you're going to cycle to Switzerland. I said, yes. He said, you have bikes? I told him what bikes we had. He said, you can't use that. You're not going to get there. But I bought touring bikes for me and my wife about a year ago. We went cycling because that's what he wanted to do. They went cycling about half an hour, and she said, this is not for me. And so they stood in the garage ever since and said, you're welcome to use them. So we had these beautiful bicycles. And so we cycled down, and we did about 600 kilometers. What's miles? That's about 400 altogether in the trip. But we knew that their train system is so good that we'll go as far as we can, and if we run out of time, we'll just pop on a train and get to our destination. And so on the last evening, the last day of the trip before we had to take a train, we were sitting at the restaurant and we had a drink and we just clinked it together and said, well done, we've done the 400 miles. And Mary Ann sat back into a yellow jacket hornet, or it's a German yellow jacket hornet. That makes it worse. And this thing was stinging. She sat forward. It's a very painful sting. And I could see it was just going. It was trying to get out, but it was actually stuck in her. So I flicked it off, and the waiter came running with some ice, and we put it on there, and the ice kind of numbed the pain. And so we got up and started walking back to this Airbnb that we rented for the night. And on the way there, we popped into a little shop just to get some water or things. And as we walked in, Mary Ann stopped and she said, get some antihistamine. And her hands started tingling, her throat started swelling up, her stomach started cramping, its anaphylactic shock started setting in. And I was running, trying to get antihistamine. And when I turned around, she was on the floor already. And so I just asked the assistant, please call your emergency services. I ran over the road to our room to try and get some antihistamine. When I came back, she was in a room with this precious young lady that worked at the till, that was just helping her there. And I kind of tried to smack her awake again lightly to get the pills in, make her drink. And when she came back, she was like shocked and pushing on all sides. And she would go in and out. And this precious German girl would say, no, you come back. And she'd wake up again. And the emergency services was there within 3 minutes. I think we were a block away from there. And so they gave her what she needed. We went to the hospital. And even on the way to the hospital, as she was regaining consciousness, she just started loving on everyone. She wanted to love and hug every person that was working around her. And so with the result is, when we came to the hospital, they said, we need to do some blood tests first before we admit you to a room. We don't know what you've been smoking, but something's funny is going on here. In any case, the test got her in, established that it was anaphylactic shock. And when I eventually went into the room with her, I said, she said to me, I was gone. I said, yes, I know you lost consciousness. And she said, no, I was in a beautiful place. And suddenly I realized how serious this was. And I said, well, where was it? Who was there? I've got a million questions. And she says, well, it was actually not somewhere else. It was beautiful, but it was right here. But it's almost like everything that wasn't eternal, everything that was temporal was gone. And only the beauty of the eternal remained. And I said, but, and who was there? And she said, you were there. And that so overwhelmed me, because from my point of view, I almost lost her. But from her perspective, love is always present. I was there. And over the next day, during that whole episode, I had to just, cut off my emotions and do what needs to be done to, get her to the hospital and back. And that evening, we slept in the room from hell. I couldn't sleep. It was very hot, so I just sat on the windowsill and watched the rats running down the alley. And the next morning they had a heat wave in Europe at that stage. So we get on the train and we started conversing a bit further. And what was so beautiful is that the way in which she described it is what remains of us is love. What remains of your life is the moments in which you have loved and in which you have learned. And as she was speaking about this experience, I suddenly looked at her and I realized I could have done this train journey on my own today. And suddenly all that emotions came, which the Germans are so comfortable with. You know, they sat all around me in the train and I kind of just started weeping. The idea as we wrote down our thoughts. But I think what happened in that moment is we started realizing in a very practical way that tomorrow is not guaranteed. And your next moment is not something you're entitled to. Moment by moment by moment, you are gifted with this God who pours himself out into your existence. The incarnation continues, and you're invited to participate with God in the joy of relationship. I'm closing with this thought. You see, for the first 3 centuries of church history, the thought that was on the theologians and on Christians' minds was, who is Jesus? Because how to speak of this man and still capture the essence of his message? How is it possible that God could become human and not be reduced in his divinity? Because, you know, when we describe God, we begin with big words such as omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. And so it's very difficult to imagine a human being who's at one place at one time. And speaking about Jesus, it says he grew in wisdom and knowledge. It speaks about in his hometown he could not do many mighty works because of unbelief. So Jesus is not omnipresent. Jesus is fully human. Yet the very foundation of the Christian faith is that he is fully united with God as well. So how is it possible that God could become human and not be reduced in his divinity? Well, I think God begins to give us a clue when he speaks to Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, and he says, Paul, I know you guys are very impressed with power, but even if I had the ability to move mountains and had the faith to accomplish anything, but I have not love, I am nothing. In other words, Paul, it is not my power that makes me me. And I know you guys are very impressed with knowledge, but if I could speak in the tongues of angels and know all things, that's omniscience, yet I have not love, I am nothing. In other words, Paul, it is not my knowledge that makes me me. You see, this is why God could become human and not be reduced in his divinity, because the quality that makes God God is love. And the human condition is in no ways a limitation for the love of God to be displayed. Every time you love, God is being himself through you. Every time you love, God is being himself through you. The incarnation is finding its crescendo. It is finding its purpose for why God pours himself out into you moment by moment by moment. Because in you, God has a unique location. God has a unique opportunity to love like He does not have anywhere else. This is why He's excited about your life. You are God's opportunity to live, to move, and to have His being in this world. We're not dealing with a foreign God, an alien God, a separate God, a demanding God. We're dealing with the God revealed in Jesus, the God who descends into our humanity, who pours Himself out willingly, moment by moment, who gifts you with life, who came and wasted His life upon you before He had any guarantee that He would have a favorable response from you. Do you want to get ready, my darling? He's excited about your life. And if you're not excited about your life, it's because you're not seeing what God sees. What He sees excites Him. Thank you, Papa. Papa, we ask that this word and this thought will just continue to stir within us, that you continue to unveil yourself as the one who wants to live and move and have your being in and through us, even as we live and move and have our being in you. Thank you, Papa. Amen.
Take it in, close your eyes, feel the warmth of my smile. I'm the one who knows you from within. I've seen through your eyes. Take it in, open your eyes, see the world through my smile. I'm the one who knows them from within. I've seen through their eyes, and I say, enjoy this moment, it is ours. Breathe in the fragrance of our love. For I am ready to live, I'm ready to laugh, I'm ready to love through your life. I'm so ready to see, ready to heal, I'm ready to be through your beautiful life. Such infinite possibilities, infinite opportunities. We take it in and we close our eyes. We feel the warmth of your smile. You're the one who knows us from within. You've seen through our eyes, and you say, enjoy this moment, it is ours. Breathe in the fragrance of our love. For I'm so ready to live, I'm ready to laugh, I am ready to live through your life. I'm so ready to see, ready to heal, ready to be through your beautiful life. There are infinite possibilities, infinite opportunities to live and to laugh, to live and to laugh and to love. So take it in. Thank you, Father. Thank you for your love. Thank you that this moment is what we have. And you fill this moment with yourself. That love fills this moment. You know, we have put vowels in the Hebrew name that we know as Yahweh, is actually the letters YHVH. And we've put the vowels in to say Yahweh, but Hebrew linguists tell us that if you have to pronounce those letters, they describe them as the sound of breathing. So if you have to say it, it would be Yo, and I just think it's so overwhelming that in the context of man often considering God is so far off, so distant, so uninvolved with our lives, that he's given himself this unpronounceable name. But I think it's beautiful that God's given his name as the sound of our breathing. That you can't but say his name when you take a breath. Yahweh. And if a child is born, is it that they must take their first breath to be alive, or is it that the name of God must be on their lips for them to truly be alive? And when we take our last breath, is it our last breath, or is it that the name of God is no longer on our lips that we pass? He is so close, closer than the heart in our chest. Closer than the heart in my chest, nearer than the words on my lips, easier than breathing in, surer than the breath flowing out. You can sing with me, closer than the heart. Closer than the heart in my chest, nearer than the words, nearer than the words on my lips, easier, easier than breathing in, surer than the breath, surer than the breath flowing out. Each breath I take, each breath I take, declares your name. With every breath I proclaim Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. You breathed your life into me. Without you, I would not be. And now I breathe back to you the breath you've given to me. Each breath I take, each breath I take declares your name. With every breath I proclaim Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Won't you sing together, Yahweh? Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. There is no distance between us, nothing more that can keep us. The name that could not be mentioned, you've united with our own breath. Sing Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Closer than the heart in my chest, nearer than the words on my lips. Yahweh.
Would you pray with me?